Hello, I'm Brad Kelly, and you're listening to Method and Madness. This is a show about books, the people who write them, and the labyrinth to be explored between the words.
Have you ever heard about Willie the Weeper? Had a job as a chimney sweeper. He had the dope habit and he had his band. Listen while I tell you about a dream he had.
I am joined this evening by Jacob Austin of the fantastic Gnostic Pulp substack. He's a writer from Texas. He writes fiction, most recently a short story called Zoning Change, which you can find at dumbopress.com. I'll have a link to that in the show notes. And nonfiction. He, as I said, he is the man behind Gnostic Pulp, which is one of my absolute favorite substacks. He's releasing content quite on the regular. And if you're a fan of Method and Madness, I think you're going to be a fan of Gnostic Pulp. In fact, I know you will be, actually. If you like this show, you're gonna like Gnostic Pulp. So definitely go check that out when you're done listening to this. And I'll have links to that in the show notes. We'll be talking about a bunch of things, I think, here, especially focusing on a couple of his pieces on his Substack. But let me just read you the titles of a couple of these pieces, just to give you a sense if you're not already familiar. One, his most recent is Everything is Weird Fiction. Read that today. Really dug it. Another one is Further Adventures in Pynchonian Reality. I really enjoyed that one. What the Hell, which is on a bunch of topics, but part of it is on Laird Barron's The Procession of the Black Sloth. I really enjoyed reading that. I talked to Laird Barron on my old podcast a couple of years ago, and he's a living legend for sure. I lost my place. Another one is Lost My Pink Light, which is a Phil Dickian origin story of Gnostic Pulp. There's a great essay in there entitled Moby Dick is About UFOs, which I think people will really enjoy. And there's also essays on the book Solenoid, the work of Joy Williams, Clarice Lispector, Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch, and a whole bunch of others. So subscribe to the Gnostic Pulp Substack for sure. And, if you're not convinced yet, I think probably you will be by the end of this episode. So first of all, thank you for joining me. I really do appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for that very kind introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first place to go is to just ask you the question, what's the name mean? What does Gnostic Pulp mean to you? I mean, I know what these two words mean individually, sort of. I have my own definition for them anyway. What is it? What does that title mean for you?
Yeah, so kind of started as a joke. I needed a bio for the short stories I was getting published, and everything I could think of just felt cheesy. Jacob Austin lives in Texas with his 2 dogs and his wife. So I wanted to come up with something better than that. So one day it hit me. Jacob Austin writes Gnostic Pulp and Weird Americana. And yeah. I didn't fully have, if you had asked me at the time, I wouldn't have had a definition for it, but that seed kind of stuck with me and I used it for years. And eventually I wanted to start investigating it a bit more. And I started writing more nonfiction, and I really wanted to investigate, what is it that brings together all this fiction that I do like Thomas Pynchon, Philip K. Dick, Joy Williams. I mean, some of it is more obviously connected, like the back of Philip K. Dick books. There's the Ursula Le Guin quote that says he's the poor man's Pynchon. But
Right.
I started investigating, what is this connective tissue? And it seemed like they were all using a sort of pulp register to ask, questions about reality.
Right.
So yeah, what I guess I can shorten it to say what I have in my about page on Substack is it is a genre which refers to that particular vein of literature and art that mashes together deep investigations into the nature of reality with dime novel tropes, general buffoonery, and other pulpy lowbrowisms.
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. Yeah, no, that's great. And that seems like, and it's sort of, I asked you that question. I mean, probably the first reason I subscribed to you is I think I came across, I don't know, linked someplace. I came across the Moby Dick is a UFO
Mhm.
essay, and then saw the name Gnostic Pulp, and I was like, okay, right off the bat, I know this guy. Whatever he's doing, I'm sure we're sharing some wavelength here because that name like kind of resonated for me too, and yeah, very just very interesting, and it does speak to something that hasn't. And what I think you're doing with your Substack is really putting your finger on a pattern that's kind of there as soon as you look for it, but maybe goes largely unnoticed. It's Philip K. Dick's The Trash Stratum. I think about this all the time. The way that stuff gets through to us is often through the pulps.
Yeah.
I've gotten obsessed with the sort of genre of not just pulp but specifically weird fiction as this sort of, I don't know about uniquely American, but particularly American kind of form of storytelling. And it lives on till now. I mean, half of the movies that are in theaters right now are essentially downstream of pulp, in my opinion,
Oh yeah.
for good or bad. I guess I want to kind of start with talking a little bit about Thomas Pynchon. I recently did an episode on Shadow Ticket with the great David Leo Rice. And I guess to start with, I know you've got a few pieces on Pynchon and his work on your Substack. Who is Thomas Pynchon for you? What does he mean to you as a writer and a thinker?
Phew. I mean, he's the man. He's I couldn't ask for a better, crystallization of all the topics I'm looking for in Gnostic Pulp. He sort of brings it all together. I mean, he writes about tarot as knowledgeably as he does about physics. Um, so he's been my favorite writer for a long time now. He's just pursuing um, questions about you know, not only what's going on politically, but almost like cosmically. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've been into him since high school. At least he's been on my radar. I read
Oh, really? Yeah.
Crying of Lot 49 and didn't get it at all, but loved the experience. Actually asked for Gravity's Rainbow that year for Christmas, and my
Nice.
parents bought it for me and totally bounced off of it for I don't know how many years.
Yeah.
It wasn't till have you listened to the Death is Around the Corner stuff on Gravity's Rainbow?
I haven't really. No.
That was sort of my gateway in. I found that podcast
Okay.
like when it first came out. 2017, I was working on a cricket farm, um, which is basically what it
They
sounds
farm
like.
crickets? Oh, okay. All
Yeah,
right. Yeah, I guess you would have. All right.
down in Austin, they farm crickets.
Wow. Okay.
So that gave me 8 hours a day of headphone time while I was
Yeah.
walking around this giant warehouse feeding and watering crickets. And
I mean, that's a very Pinchonian experience in and of itself, isn't it?
uh,
Working at a cricket farm,
my resume
right?
is a Pynchonian resume.
Is that right? That's
The
awesome.
cricket farm is
Yeah, I
the
mean, I
crowning
guess
jewel.
I never thought of it, but yeah, there has to be because it for pet feed and stuff like that, right? There aren't
Oh,
they? Don't they?
you wish it was for
Yeah.
pet feed. We were raising them for protein bars and protein powders.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's oh man. It's funny. I'm like for some reason I'm really grossed out by the fact that we wind up in food, but on some level, I mean, like I don't know. It's just food, right?
Yeah,
But
it's food
it is a
and
little unsettling.
it was a job, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What did you think of? I find it really interesting. The one thing you said in there about sort of starting Pynchon young and not getting it, but like it ends up coming back around to you. And it seems like almost everybody I've talked to about Thomas Pynchon has a not exactly the same story, but something similar, where it's sort of like they read it, it doesn't really make any sense to them on some level, but they know there's something in there. And eventually they kind of find their own version of a skeleton key, whether it's a podcast or finding somebody else, meeting somebody they know, or just like committing to like, I'm going to get as much as I can out of Gravity's Rainbow or whatever. I think that's really interesting. Also as almost like a personality test or something, because I have writers like I'm that way with too. Not so much Pynchon. I didn't really read any Pynchon until I was like 30 or something. But I have other writers where I tried them and I didn't understand what they were doing, but I knew it wasn't because one way you can react to that is being like, well, this is stupid,
Right.
Like I don't get it, but it's dumb. It's not really doing anything. And the other version is to being like trying to like extend yourself into it, sort of like this gap is because I'm not smart enough or literate enough, or I don't have enough historical references or whatever it is. I've got to like rise to meet this book. So kudos to you for doing that for sure. What did you think of Shadow Ticket?
Yeah, so I actually, after you reached out and mentioned you wanted to talk about Shadow Ticket, I said I need to read this a second time so I don't sound like an idiot.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Okay, cool. So you've read it twice. Well, I've read it like once and a half. So yeah.
yeah,
But I guess just starting off the beginning, like yeah, I'm assuming it's a thumbs up from you.
yeah. No, I mean, the first time I read it, I mean, I was grinning ear to ear as soon as I opened it. Just, I had never expected another novel. So, um,
Yeah.
on a prose level, I think he still has it. Um, I just, it was like going back to high school, really, because it was just the first time I had tackled a book before all the, secondary material had hit the internet. So it was like I was reading Crying
Right.
of Lot 49 all over again, and I had no one to turn to.
Right.
Um, so I just felt like so much was going over my head, and I was like, I don't know, part of me felt not defeated, but I was like, I should be able to get more than this. Um,
Mm.
but the second go around, I feel like it opened up to me, and just I wasn't trying as hard, I think, and the emotional weight kind of hit me more, and it just hit me like,
Interesting.
I mean, it's a sad book. It just feels like it's saturated with this like sorrow of like a world on the brink of ending and a new one
Yeah.
on the verge of um
Right.
just
Right. A new one being born, and it's not going to be, you get the sense it's not going to be a good one.
yeah.
Right. It's, yeah.
Yeah, there's all
Yeah.
these lines about like people who they can sense what is on the horizon, and
Hmm.
I mean Hicks is like homesick for bowling and like fish fries,
Right.
and it's like he's never gonna have that again.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so
Right.
I ended up, yeah, I
Yeah.
really loved it, especially the second go round, and it felt like I don't know, just not just sad from the story itself, but like I finished it and I looked over to my bookshelf and I saw his long line of books that I have, and it's like these decades of tomes, and like I mean a lot of it is very like dark and sorrowful already, but there's
Sure.
always this like at least in the characters hope for a better world, and then it's like it
Mm.
ends on this note, and it kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I mean, it is significant to think about it as, his last book. So there's nobody out, there's no, you know, I had talking to David Leo Rice, and I kind of like made a jokey tweet about this a while ago. Putting, I don't know if you're familiar with Harold Bloom. In 2003, he identified what he said were the four greatest living American writers, and it was Thomas Pynchon and Philip Roth and Don DeLillo and Cormac McCarthy, and two of those guys are dead now, and Don DeLillo is even older than Thomas Pynchon at this point. So maybe we get another book or a posthumous book out of them or whatever. But it's kind of over.
Hmm.
Even if you don't, even if you didn't, don't necessarily subscribe to Harold Bloom's distinction, it does feel like something in American literature has kind of come to a close. And I wasn't even really thinking about that when I was reading Shadow Ticket, but then as I kind of got to the end, it was sort of like, yeah, we're gonna be. This is like, we're like post something now, because people will pick up the Thomas Pynchon mantle to a certain degree, but I don't know if anybody really. I don't know if anybody can really do. I shouldn't say I don't know. Nobody can really do what he did.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Um, yeah, you might be able to write a paragraph that reads like Thomas Pynchon, but to pull in all of the stuff that guy just seems like a wide open antenna picking up like the entire bandwidth of everything, and I don't know that anybody can pull that off anymore. So
yeah, and
yeah,
I mean, the systems are not getting any more manageable, so it's just like sprawling out wider and wider, and eventually nothing can capture all of that.
right, yeah, and I mean it calls to mind for me too. It's like, I think that there's a sort of an end to like the comprehensibility of things. Like I think it was always kind of everything was always kind of incomprehensible, but I think there was maybe a time, sort of pre-internet or whatever, where it seemed like you could understand what was going on, and now it just seems like it's total chaos. so so yeah, now it's like good luck.
Yeah,
You're gonna have to wade through deep fakes and just a million outright contradictory lies, and it's I yeah, I think a Thomas Pynchon project of the 21st century will be interesting to see. Somebody's going to try to do it. Maybe somebody, maybe it's one of our mutuals. That would be cool to see.
as long as it's not me.
Yeah, that's a heavy burden. Those are big shoes to fill. What did you think of? This is like the year of Pynchon too, in terms of, sort of as close to mainstream as as he's gotten up till now, at least. What did you think of the One Battle After Another film? I'm assuming you saw it.
Yes, I saw it in
Yeah.
the theater where Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested, which
Whoa, that's
it
awesome.
felt
That theater's still operating?
it's still operating. It's basically I mean, it's amazing. It's like an art house theater in Dallas now. They do like live shows
Whoa.
and uh I mean movies that you're not going to see anywhere else. And it's all
Wow.
very like the AC was broken while we were there, so it's not at all up to date, but
Right.
they're doing really cool stuff there.
How cool. How hard did they lean into it being where Lee Harvey Oswald was? Like, it's not called like Oswald's, is it?
No, there's plenty
Yeah.
of that around Dallas. There's a
Yeah.
Lee Hazy Oswald IPA, but the
Okay.
theater is
Right.
just called the Texas.
Okay. I'm gonna have to go there one of these days.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, look them
that's
up. They
interesting.
do all sorts of great stuff.
Okay. Huh. Very cool. So you saw it in this theater. That's a Pinchonian moment right there.
Yeah, it felt
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. It makes sense. Makes sense. But yeah, what did you think of the movie?
I really enjoyed it. I feel like I'm thinking of it more as a Paul Thomas Anderson work
Yeah.
than a Thomas Pynchon work, which I mean, clearly Anderson made it. I've seen
Right.
a lot of mixed reviews online, especially from the real Pynchon heads. Um,
Yeah.
but I thought it was
Those-
really
yeah,
interesting.
some people can't accept anything but like a diehard faithful adaptation,
Yeah,
right? Like,
which he already gave us that
yeah,
with Inherent Vice.
right.
So I thought it was really interesting that he basically made a character study out of a Pynchon book, because that's kind of what he gets criticized the most for, is his characters are often called like one-sided jokes or just goofy
Right.
names. But yeah, basically, I'm gonna forget their movie character names.
Right.
Um,
Oh, I am too. Perfidia. Oh, geez, I can't remember any of their names either.
uh,
um, yeah.
yeah, but Zoid, for lack of a better name, Leonardo DiCaprio. Uh, I mean, basically a character study of him stepping into fatherhood, and as a new father, I was very interested in that angle. And the politics kind of are, mm, I mean, they're there, but they're more decor than going as deep into it
Mhm.
as Pynchon would. Um,
Right.
but as a character study of like these people who are actually being affected by kind of by these things that he writes about, more zoomed in on that. I thought it was
Yeah.
a great time. The performances were great. The soundtrack was incredible. And the chase
Yeah.
scene at the end is, I'm never going to stop thinking about that.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. Yeah, no, Leonardo DiCaprio's performance is incredible. You know, he's interesting. Like, he's a guy for some reason I always try to dislike. Like I always try, but I every time I see a movie in it with him in it, I'm sort of captivated.
You know,
I don't
I
know what
kind of,
it is.
yeah, anytime I see him in the
Yeah.
listing, I'm like, oh, great, DiCaprio. And then
Yeah.
he's like stealing the show.
Right, right. Yeah, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he's incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and yeah. So yeah, he knocked it out of the park. And then Benicio del
Uh,
Toro, the sensei, I could have watched 3 hours of him being the
I've
sensei,
been
to be
saying,
honest.
I've just
Just
been muttering ocean waves to myself anytime I get stressed out.
right. Right, perfect. Yeah. He was such a good character. Now, Vineland is not one that I have read, to be honest. How do you sort of in the constellation of Pynchon books? I don't want you to necessarily diehard rate them, but like, is Vineland in the upper half or the lower half? What do you think of it, or have you read it even? I shouldn't just assume that you have.
So I returned to it this year, and it honestly jumped way up in my ranking.
Okay.
It had been an early one that I read the first go around, maybe second or third one I read, and I liked it, but I never really thought of it after I started reading his tomes. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
read it again this year, and it really hit. I think of the Pynchon Light, it might be
Yeah.
my top.
Oh, really?
It's just got
Interesting. Yeah.
it's got so much going on that, I mean, there's no way you could make an actual honest adaptation in,
Yeah.
unless you did like a 16-hour mini series or something. But
Right. Right. Yeah. This is what I think it's sometimes lost when I see people, being again that need or that desire for the adaptation to be super faithful. It's, I mean, first of all, a novel and a film are like completely different things. They share some elements for obviously storytelling, and you've got characters, and there are a lot of elements. I mean, they're more similar than architecture and dancing or whatever, but there are very much like two different. They're So to expect them to be, first of all, faithful is like, to me, is kind of an unreasonable expectation to have. And I'm almost more interested when a certain degree of liberties are taken. Like, I'm kind of interested, as a writer, I'm interested in the divergences and like how those decisions actually get made,
mm,
just sort of creatively. Like, how do you solve the puzzle of, I'm going to turn this book that takes 14, 15, 20 hours to read, I'm going to turn it into a 2-hour film, and it's going to be the same thing. Like, how do you get there? It's really interesting creative problem to me.
yeah,
And there's good ones and bad ones for sure.
Yeah,
and more faithful ones. And like No Country for Old Men is basically the book on screen, more or less. It's as close as you can get, but you know, there are some other adaptations that are go a little far afield, and One Battle After Another was one of those. I think that's part of the reason they gave it a different name, a different title than the book, probably.
yeah. I think he definitely gave himself the distance, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. I've been thinking of the material you adapt something from, almost like the block you start for like with
Mm-hmm.
sculpture, and I mean,
Right, right,
you use that as sort of your medium, and you create something of your own out of that, which
right.
you know, I gotta say, I really enjoy what he did with this one.
Yeah, yeah. Well, cool. I want to talk a bit about some Philip K. Dick stuff. Philip K. Dick is on my mind quite a bit lately. People listening to this, I just did an episode on Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch, and I kind of laid that out before I even knew you had a pretty in depth piece called Year of the Lichen on Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch. Um, I you know I don't know how much. It seems like you're quite familiar with Philip K. Dick's work. I sort of made a joke the other day. I don't know that anybody has read all of Philip K. Dick. Maybe somebody out there has, but there's. I mean, that's. I think it's 60 novels, or it's at least 40, and the quality varies quite a bit. You know, that early stuff was to get a paycheck. Some of it, not that there aren't great ideas in there, but he wasn't. He wasn't necessarily taking the time to fully develop some of this stuff in the earlier books. But so Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch, like how do you? I guess this is a similar question to talking about where Vineland fits in with for you in the Thomas Pynchon world. How does Three Stigmata fit into PKD for you? Like, are you? I know a lot of people are really high on like Valis as being sort of the Philip K. Dick masterpiece. Other people are, it's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is where all the real heat and light is. How is Three Stigmata fit into his work for you?
Um, I mean, it's favorite wise, it's not at the top, but it's in the probably the next section down of that for me. But he
Yeah.
kind of writes about it in the exegesis as like a hinge point in his work of basically like the night is darkest just before the dawn, and this is like the darkest part of the night. And
Right.
it is,
Right.
I definitely haven't read all of his work either. I've probably
Yeah.
somewhere around 15 to 20 of his novels, um,
Okay. Yeah.
which is a
That's a
fair amount.
chunk. That's a lot.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
this
Yeah.
does feel like the most nihilistic one of those that I've read. It's uh,
Yeah.
it's pretty bleak.
It's it's the most to me. It's the most what do they call it? It's like the most info hazard uh book of his, where like the thought experiment at the center of it is the most, for me personally at least, is like the most unsettling because it I read it just recently. I read it twice basically. As I'm doing these shows, I read it once and I take a lot of like I highlight a lot of sections and make a lot of notes, and then I read back through and I read all the highlighted sections again. So it's like I read the book, I don't know, a half
Right.
time after that, right? And and yeah, I just realized, when you first get into it, you don't necessarily know this, but as I sort of immediately flipped back to the beginning and started again, I kind of realized like, oh, I have no reason to assume that this first scene is actually happening either. Like, the first scene is perhaps in Choosy land, right? And for people who haven't read Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch, I mean, the fundamental thing of it is there's this existence of actually two drugs, candy and Choosy, in the future that allow people to what they call translate, which in the candy case you go to this sort of it's almost like you go to Barbie land effectively, and Barbie land is sort of defined by how much Barbie stuff you've bought. It's a real crude way of paraphrasing it, but it's basically the case. And then QZ is like purportedly way more open world and you can kind of define your experience, but it turns out that it's actually being controlled by this guy, Palmer Eldritch, who who is like an Elon Musk type figure who went outside the solar system and got infected by the thought form of some alien species or something like that. But, as you kind of read this book, like I said, there's going back through it, you get to the beginning and it's like, okay, maybe none of this book actually happened. But then obviously it's a book anyway, so of course none of it actually happened. But the info hazard part of it to me is like that idea starts like spreading outside of the book for me a little bit. Just sort of like, now I'm going on the internet to talk to somebody about Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch. And it's like, does that guy just live in the internet? Like this, and vice versa. Like for him, do I just live in the internet? Like where does the actual world happen? It gets a little blurrier and blurrier. Is that, is that kind of thing for you part of the appeal of Philip K. Dick? Is sort of the thought experiment stuff of it? Is that Gnostic? What Philip K. Dick is doing in this book?
I mean, I feel like more than just writing science fiction, he was using science fiction almost as a medium to ask these questions himself. And I mean, Three Stigmata is certainly Gnostic with its living inside the mind of, an evil billionaire alien monster from outer space.
Right.
But,
right. Well, and that's so, for people who aren't like super familiar with the concept of Gnosticism, it's not that easy of a thing to sort of pin down. But one aspect of it, of various schools of Gnostic thought, is that this world that we live in was created and is sort of administered by a lesser god, right? And some schools of thought that God is evil, and some he's just sort of incompetent. But there's actually we live in a false world that's created by this entity, sometimes called the demiurge. And then Gnosticism is about sort of like trying to get beyond that, get out sort of outside of the trap of this prison planet or prison reality that's been established. And that basic concept, I don't know I've ever seen anybody execute it in a novel quite as well as Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch to make me feel like that's a possible reality that I'm in right now, where it really like draws you to the attention to, like we know, even if you're totally just Gnosticism, if a person even thinks all that's kind of silly to even think about, we do know that like the lived experience we have is all just like what we perceive, and it's really just like our eyes and our senses turning some kind of information into an experience we can inhabit. So like even on that level, we kind of live in a false reality, like inside our own heads. But you don't go through your day like that. Right? You go through your day and you just like do things, right? And you see your wife and you see your house and you see all the stuff around you. But Three Stigmata is one of these. I felt like I like lifted my head up and I was looking for the Matrix code to start appearing in things, or looking for my hand to become mechanical or something.
Yeah, it is.
It's really potent that way.
It feels like his more of a horror novel than a sci-fi novel.
Yeah, it's scary for sure. Do you think? I mean, this is a very open-ended question, but for all the science fiction that was written in the 60s and the 70s, it seems to me that Philip K. Dick is like now the most popular of that time period. Like I think more people read Philip K. Dick than maybe read any other science fiction from the 60s or 70s, except for maybe Dune. How would you why do you think that? Do you have any like thoughts on why that might be? Like, why is he still around, but like the 7,000 other people he was in magazines with, they're, we've kind of forgotten about most of them.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it. Um, and I feel like the fact that he was not just treating these like stories, but an actual like, I mean, he was trying to figure this stuff out through stories. I think
Mm-hmm.
maybe that gets through to people, because he has a whole, a cult of personality around him, basically. Either
Yeah.
you think he's just a crazy guy who is fun to talk about, or he's
Right.
treated like an actual mystic who received these messages from beyond somehow. Either way, makes him a
Yeah.
very appealing person to look into. And then
Right.
you actually do start to read his work, and beyond all of that, you can feel this like, I mean, most of his characters are like repairmen or just like people down on their luck, and you can feel this real like a love for them from him, and like he understands their
Right.
suffering, and
Yeah.
like almost on their behalf he wants to figure out why things are going so wrong, and almost like a savior figure, he wants to set things straight. um,
Yeah.
those are my best guesses.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot. There definitely is. I mean, the one thing, and this is just kind of tagged onto that last point you're making. Like, there's nothing pretentious about Philip K. Dick's work. There's like no snobbishness to it, right? There's no like I the author am smarter than you
No.
ever, right? Yeah, and so yeah, it all feels like it all feels, the characters always feel like relatable human beings. Yeah, I think that's a big factor. I think like for me, a lot of the what kind of turns me back from a lot of science fiction is it's like, all right, this is about like a starship captain, or or this is about like about these things that they they feel too contrived. Whereas Philip K. Dick's stuff, it's super imaginative and frankly contrived. But since he's got this sort of like, you know, a kind of normal dude in it, it feels like you can kind of just pour yourself into that guy and experience this world. It feels somehow more believable or something. Like it somehow doesn't break the like it doesn't break your suspension of disbelief because you got Barney Mayerson who's kind of got a drinking problem and is sad about his wife.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
and
like he's like a real guy.
he's
Yeah.
not trying to, I feel like some sci-fi writers just want to like show off their sci-fi ideas, and PKD,
Right.
I mean, he might get bored with his halfway through the book and never mention it again. It's like he just needs some framing device to hold these ideas in,
Right.
and that happens to be sci-fi.
Right. Right. Do you think do you, do you think Philip K. Dick was a mystic, or was he quote unquote just crazy?
um, that's the
And you
question.
don't have to solidly come down, but like, yeah. Or is there any difference? I don't know.
I mean, I think he was onto something. Whether or not you believe Gnosticism is a actual like cosmic religious understanding, um, or you can just say it's a metaphor. And I think he was sort of certainly tracing the outlines of what he called the Black Iron Prison, which was this sort of
Mhm.
um, almost like an invisible empire that went back to the Roman Empire, and
Right.
was I think of it as like the profit motive, everything slowly coming under the control of the profit motive, um,
Right.
which has been happening at least since the Roman Empire, and it sort of
Right.
destroys all these more traditional or localized cultures and ways of life. And
Mhm.
I feel like the real horror for him is of the Black Iron Prison is like you're told your world is for one thing, and secretly everything is just for making someone else money.
Right.
And
Right. Right.
the horror of having to live in that world and see it. So in that way, I think he's a mystic, that he was able to see these giant, like a superstructure that no one else was able to, at least in his terms, vocalize like he did. I'm
Yeah.
sure he did. He could have certainly used some sort of help. I mean, he was taking all sorts of amphetamines and living on dog food at one point. So I
Yeah.
wish he
Yeah.
could have gotten some help as well, and maybe he would have
Yeah.
lived longer than he did.
Yeah.
So
Cranked out a few more. Cranked out a few. I mean, he was about. He was sort of. I mean, I did a kind of deep dive on his biography at one point, and he was starting. I mean, he was alive while Blade Runner was getting made, but he never. I don't think he ever got to see it actually in theaters. But there was. He was like coming up to the point of being like wildly successful. I
mm-hmm.
think. Because as soon as Blade Runner, right after Blade Runner came out, since then it's just been like a tide of Philip K. Dick film and television adaptations, right? There's like one every year and a half or something since then. Maybe the 80s was a little bit, it took a little while to take off, but you know, I can think of half a dozen off the top of my head. So yeah, it's really unfortunate that he kind of didn't quite get to see it. And you talk about the amphetamines. I mean, I don't know if there's anybody who did as many amphetamines as him. It's
Yeah, I mean, there's
it's
a
an
reason he wrote 60
unsettling
novels.
amount. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and I mean I kind of laugh at it just because of the scale of it, but there is, I mean, it's also kind of sad. And I also kind of get it. I mean, it's from a writer, you know, not that I partake, but I don't because I'm terrified that it'll work too well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This like just crank the throttle up a little bit. That might be too good, you
Yeah.
know. As long, but obviously unsustainable. Yeah, I think he. You know, the one thing he really kind of brings home for me in a certain way about this, because I've always been interested in this sort of like visionary slash insane sort of spectrum. And I think, you know, most of the sort of religious visionaries of history, I think if you put them in the context of like 2025, they look like crazy people. But that doesn't mean that all, you know, quote unquote, crazy people are visionaries. And, you know, I sometimes wonder if one of the distinctions between the two is having the ability to like articulate what you're seeing and experiencing, like Philip K. Dick does in his science fiction, right? Being able to like distill it into something that you can transmit to another person as something that makes sense. Whereas, you know, I think a lot of the unfortunate people who have serious mental illnesses, they might be tapping into some of the same stuff Philip K. Dick is, but they just don't have the capacity to do anything with it. I wonder how often that happens. I don't think it's, you know, I think I mean, you know, it's almost the commonplace that, like, you know, old sort of tribal communities, oftentimes that person became like the shaman or the medicine man of the group because they were tapped into something and they didn't know what else to do with this person, but they seemed to be seeing another layer to things or something. In our society, we don't have anywhere to put that kind of person at all. We just medicate them,
Yeah.
basically,
That's
until they don't act like that anymore.
that's why we need to get the pulp publishers back up and going.
Yeah, right. Somewhere for all my internet friends to get their word with that. Well, you know, and the thing is, I like that you said whether Philip K. Dick was maybe just kind of identifying a metaphor or something, because again, whether or not like there's some truth to Gnosticism in a sort of cosmological sense, there is like some useful sort of mental constructs for thinking, in my opinion, for thinking about the internet, right? Like, because it is this little fabricated, illusory world that, you know, we spend time in, and some of us, including me, spend too much time in. And a lot of times things in it that appear like one thing are actually something else. Like, they look like one thing that seems valuable to us, but really it's just like a means for for stealing your data from you to sell to somebody else, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I know it's like a commonplace, but that whole thing of like, if you're not paying for the service, then what is that? Like,
Oh,
if you're not,
you're the product or
yeah,
whatever it is.
you're right. Like, that seems like a truism, but like there's something really powerful about that as a idea. Like, if you keep that in mind, that like, if I'm not paying for this service, I am paying for it somehow. But if I'm not paying for it with cash, I'm probably paying for it with something else. My attention, which is critically valuable, or my time, or my data, or my sanity in some cases, right? Yeah. So that's a, yeah, we're sort of the internet. I guess my point is the internet is kind of like the black iron prison, sort of.
Yeah.
Even though
But
even though you can have fun on there too.
I mean, that's the inbreaking force of uh, in Gnosticism, Sophia, or as Dick would call it, Zebra or Valis. It's the thing outside of, you know, the demiurge, the black iron prison that's trying to reach us, and maybe on the internet, that's the friends you make there.
Right. Yeah, well, that definitely is the case. I mean, that's one of the positive sides of the internet is, you know, you get to like meet up with people who have similar interests and stuff like that. And, you know, I don't know about you, but, you know, I don't run into a lot of people in my daily life that have read a bunch of Pynchon and a bunch of Philip K. Dick and want to talk about it.
I see one guy, actually, the liquor store I go to, every time I go in, it's right by my work,
Yeah.
and I usually have a book at work. So, not that I'm at the
Right.
liquor store all the time, but when I do go in,
Sure.
he sees my book and he says, "You ever read any Philip K. Dick?" And I'm like, "Actually,
Yeah.
yeah, like I love him." And he
Yeah.
basically does not register anything I say. He just keeps going on his monologue. And he says, oh, what's the one he recommends? Every time he says, "You should read Flow My Tears," the policeman said. And I'm like, "Actually, I love that one." And he just
Right.
keeps bulldozing
We've had
forward.
this conversation.
And he's like, "People don't tell you about that one. It's not as well known, but it's actually his best. You should check it out." And I'm like, I could walk in here holding it one day. He would tell me the same thing. So one time I told him, like, "Oh yeah, you told me that last time." And he just said, "Sorry, man. I've done so much acid and coke in my life. I don't remember anything." I'm like, "That's a PKD fan right there."
Yeah, exactly, exactly. That guy's living in a Phil Dick novel
So
for
I
sure.
get to talk to him about it every couple of weeks.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that's a very Phil Dickian premise. It's just like this guy trying to convince somebody to read this book, like over everybody he meets. He's trying to do it, and all the people do. They all read it, and they all want to talk to him about it. But like, he can't remember the fact that he's talked about it.
It's a tragedy.
It kind of is. It's unfortunate. Oh man. So I guess in thinking about sort of Philip K. Dick stuff, is there you have the Gnostic Pulp origin story is one of your I apologize. Lost Was My Pink Light. Have you? And you don't have to get any more personal than you absolutely want to, and I can share ones I've had potentially. But have you ever had anything that would be like a Phil Dickian, like something a little bit unexplained happening within your consciousness?
I
Have
mean,
you had, as a writer, do you tap into something? Do you feel like?
yes, certainly not to the PKD level, but I mean, I've had weird experiences that I wouldn't say left any imprint of knowledge on me, but I certainly can't explain them. Sort of a feeling of wonder. And when I write, nonfiction, which I've been focused on lately with this project, is of course a bit different. But for fiction,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to plan. I don't know how to plot out anything. I kind of just sit and hope something takes over, and
Yeah.
somehow it often does, which feels like tapping into something, whether you want to call that
Right.
your
Right.
subconscious or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
Yeah. I think most people who write fiction can or do other arts. I think they most people can relate to that on some level. There does seem to be, yeah, even like you said, even if it is just sort of tapping into your subconscious on some other level, it definitely feels like you're picking up. I always feel like I'm sitting down until I can tune something in. I
Hmm.
just gotta like just get quiet for a while, and then okay, it starts sort of coming in. Start getting the station dialed in just right, and then oh, here we go. Okay,
Yeah,
now I know what to do.
and that's
Yeah,
honestly
yeah.
that's sort of what I've been doing with Gnostic Pulp too. Is I'll get
Mm.
usually the titles come to me first. So like Moby Dick
Oh,
is about
interesting. Okay.
UFOs, and then I'm like, oh shit, I gotta figure out how. And it becomes this investigation,
Right.
and it's like I received this message, and now I gotta figure out what it means, which has been a really fun way
Well,
to write.
yeah. No, that's amazing because that does turn you into like literally like an occult detective of some kind, right?
Right. Like
Whereas,
there's a line in
right?
Shadow Ticket that expressly uh, warns you not to do that. From Lou Bass
Oh, is
Night.
there really?
He says something about not
Oh,
becoming
okay.
a metaphysical detective.
Oh, right.
And I
Yes,
was like,
yes,
oh,
yes. Yeah,
well,
yeah.
sorry, Tom.
Whoops. What does Lou Bass Knight know anyway?
Right.
He's out. He's from like the 20 or the 19th century anyway.
Yeah, it's a new world,
Uh,
old man.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, let's talk about the Moby Dick is a UFO. Moby Dick is about UFOs, I should say, uh, a little bit because this was, I think, the first piece by you that I read, and I was like, oh, this is cool. This is the kind of stuff that I want to read and see more of. Just and sort of for the very reason that sort of I think was I was on some level picking up on this reason that you're talking about, like that as soon as you see that weirdly enough when as soon as I read that title I just was like yeah that's probably true and I had no connective tissue at all. I was just like yeah
That
I
makes
get
sense.
it. I didn't get it but I sort of got it by the end but ultimately like it's a great essay for a bunch of reasons and part of it you start off talking about Cormac McCarthy's unpublished screenplay. It's called Of Whales and Men, I think. Is that right? Something like
Yes, of
that.
Oils and Men.
Yeah, Of Whales and Men. And I haven't read the whole thing. I found parts of it online, I want to say. Maybe not a lot of it, but just enough to like get a sense of it. I don't know how great of a movie it would have made,
Oh, terrible.
but it's yeah, it's a fascinating text. Before we get into that, like tell me about you went to the Cormac McCarthy archive, right?
Yeah, so it was actually located at the school I went to. Um, it's part of the Southwest Texas Writers Archive in the Whitliff Collection, which just happens to be
Right.
at Texas State University, which is not exactly the most renowned school. Um,
Right.
kind of gets a party school reputation here in Texas. Um, but they have this great archive in the library that has, I mean, every major writer who wrote about Texas or was from Texas, from Cormac
Yeah.
McCarthy to, I mean, Larry McMurtry. They've got Willie Nelson letters and King of the Hill scripts,
Oh, I
Naomi
didn't know that. That's cool.
Shihab and
Hmm.
John Graves, all these great people.
Yeah, John Graves is great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So they have like 7 collections of Cormac stuff, including at that time, it was the only place you could find Of Whales and Men.
Okay.
I was scouring the internet for it. Then I still like Cormac, but
Yeah.
at that time he was like the top of my list, and
Okay. Yeah.
I had to find this
Right. This manuscript, this
manuscript.
screenplay.
And then as I was trying to
Yeah.
find it online, I was like, oh, it's here in town. Like I had no idea.
Oh, Oh, so you didn't even know about the archive. That's
No,
interesting. Yeah.
I was not the greatest student, I'll say that.
Fair
Um,
enough. Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
didn't know what I had.
I actually I did when I went to UT Austin. I ended up for a paper. I went down and looked at the Cormac McCarthy archive, the sort of earlier drafts of Blood Meridian. I only spent like 3 or 4 hours there, so I didn't go through a bunch of stuff. But man, that was a cool experience
Yeah, no, they
for
just
sure. Seeing this,
they bring out the big
yeah,
box, and it's just, I mean, I didn't know what I was expecting when I went in. I asked for the manuscript for the screenplay, expecting to just get this neat
yeah,
folder with a screenplay in it. And she
yeah,
goes into this back room. She like first makes sure you don't have a phone or anything. They give you a pen and paper there, and that's all you're allowed to have in the room.
right,
She goes back into this hidden archive and comes back with a giant box. And I'm like
right.
19 or 20. I have no idea what I'm doing. She just drops it on the table in
Yeah,
front of me and goes and sits in the corner and leaves me to it.
right.
So I start digging through it, and I actually, by the end, realized I read a rough draft that had like
Yeah,
handwritten notes in the margins.
that's cool.
Um,
Yeah.
so I've never actually read the final draft. This seemed to be pretty close to the end, um,
Mm,
but I'm not sure if how different it is from there to
right.
his
Right.
final product.
Yeah. How, how would you characterize it? Like, what is it about? I guess
Like you said, it would not be a good
roughly.
movie.
Yeah.
It's, to the best of my memory, a few guys on a boat who are talking about whales and
Right.
basically, in classic Cormac style, pontificating is probably the best word for it, about whale
Right.
intelligence and human intelligence and the nature of consciousness. And there's one line about if now I'm forgetting it. Basically, if humanity can't save the whales, then humanity itself is doomed.
Mm,
If you can't
right.
see like the
Right.
beauty of intelligence in another creature, then like you're not gonna you're gonna screw this one up, basically.
Well, there's some truth to that. That's for sure. Yeah. 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 That's interesting. That archival stuff is I don't know. When I went down there, it was interesting because, like I said, I was at UT Austin, and UT Austin has the Harry Ransom Center. I'm not sure if you're familiar with
Mm,
that or not, but
yeah, I haven't been, but I've heard of it.
huge. I mean, yeah, it might be. I mean, it's got to be up there with the largest literary archives in the United States. I mean, it's crazy. I looked at Aleister Crowley's personal tarot deck there, and I
Wow.
read like Don DeLillo draft and like his went through his folders on like research for white noise and read a bunch of William Faulkner's letters, like his handwritten letters, all kinds of stuff. I would just go there and like have no purpose for it, but just be like, yeah, I'd like to see this. Okay, you know. But then it was interesting to then find out that Cormac McCarthy was like down the road a ways. It's like that's really interesting that his stuff isn't in here, where from my perspective, here's where everybody is.
Yeah,
Like, what's he doing? What's he doing down there?
I
It's
do
very
wonder how that
interesting.
happened.
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't know if they're getting is Texas State. You might not know, but are they getting the rest of his stuff now that he's passed?
Um, I don't know, honestly.
Yeah,
Haven't kept up with that.
yeah. I wonder. Yeah, I wonder if they are. Probably it would make sense. Anyway, are for people out there, if they're commonly like, I don't know if Texas State was open to the public. There was a little bit of a process to go, but I think any person could go
Yeah, I
ultimately and
think all you have
look
to
at
do
this
is
stuff.
fill out a piece of paper with your intention, and it seems
Yeah.
you would be welcome.
Yeah, yeah, and Harry Ransom Center was a similar. They made you watch like a 15-minute video on handling archival materials, but other than that, it was like, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, for readers out there, like if and there are these like little archives all over the place. Um, find one that's close to you and literally just go see something. It's so cool. I can't tell you like how big of a deal it was for me to read look at Don DeLillo's marked up drafts and be like, oh, he wrote a shitty draft. Like this chapter sucks. The early version of this chapter in a book I love sucked, and he made it better. And like that for me as a writer was like almost like a watershed moment. And I was like, oh, I just thought like these great writers just like they sat down and they just typed and it came out more or less perfect. Not that it was easy, but like I didn't recognize, I don't think I totally understood until I saw that like the polishing process, like how many iterations something can go through. Sometimes stuff just comes out great or whatever. But anyway, people out there, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably read a lot, and if you've never been to a literary archive of any kind, come up with a reason to go to one. They're awesome. And if you're anywhere near San Marcos, go to see Cormac McCarthy's stuff for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to go back and dip into the other 6 archives of his that they have.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. The Blood Meridian stuff was cool. Like you get a real sense of how much research he actually did, which you can pick up by reading the book. But like he's just got like like little personalized definitions of all these random words, and some of them where he found them. And it's been a long time, but I remember reading an earlier draft of the first chapter of Blood Meridian, and it was way different
Oh, yeah.
than what it came out. So it was pretty interesting to see that as well. But anyway, more on Moby Dick is about UFOs, which is I think of as like the archetypal Gnostic Pulp essay. And I don't want to like totally give away like where you go with that. I do just want to kind of build up some enthusiasm in people who are listening to this to go check it out. But I do want to ask you, just because this is like my question when I'm at a party, I corner somebody and I'm like, what do you think of the UFO phenomenon? What is it? What's going on?
So you're that guy at the party.
Yeah, yeah, I am.
Yeah, I think I like to think about it. So there's basically the 2 schools of thought of the nuts and bolts. They're basically like spacecraft visiting from another planet, or the much weirder and less defined like consciousness side. Either they're something Jungian like projection of the collective unconscious, or like Jacques Vallée is a guy, a ufologist I reference in this essay, and he connected it back to like earlier myths of the fairies, or different mythological stories from across the world, and
Right.
basically kind of tying it back to the collective unconscious, because it's like these things appear and early on in the stories they take all sorts of shapes, and then as more stories begin to add up, it's like each culture starts to expect these things to look a certain way. So
Right.
in the 50s, you've got the Cold War, everyone's worried about satellites, and space travel is big, and you start to hear stories about little craft that are in the air. And a lot
Right.
of the stories from like the earlier half of the 20th century, they look like all sorts of different things. And then
Right.
it kind of crystallizes into like the saucer or the cigar, but it basically almost I almost think of it like a QR code, like a culture scans this phenomenon that's coming in, and
Yeah.
it takes the shape of sort of what you've been raised to expect. And in medieval Ireland, that might have been the Fae. Um,
Mhm.
and now it might be a UFO. But what it is actually that is being scanned, I have no idea.
Yeah. No,
Something,
uh, yeah. Something that we almost can't I do really almost think it's like something we can only really comprehend in in that form. It has to get sort of like broken down into a way that we can digest it. Um, yeah, no, I'm that's kind of the direction that I lean for into what it is. I always sort of as a kid was very excited about the idea that this was like interplanetary beings in physical ships. I'm really not convinced of that anymore. There's a really I've recently gotten obsessed with. There's a subreddit called Rusted Satellite. There's an underscore in there somewhere, and it's almost all just videos of abnormally shaped UFOs. Like there's no saucers, there's no cigar shaped stuff, there's no the big triangle ones
mm,
with the lights. It's none of that. They're all weird.
huh,
Um, S-shaped stuff spinning, like stuff that like the jellyfish ones. There's a whole zoo of these odd, and I've gotten kind of obsessed with it because it's dedicated to like what that suggests to me is like, okay, we had this if this is really happening, right? I don't know. Maybe these videos that people are putting on there are all AI. I have no idea, but uh if we used to see it as the Fae, and like back in biblical times they saw it as like Ezekiel's wheel or whatever, and then then during the Cold War we saw it in like Sputnik terms or whatever. Like the stuff I'm seeing on Rusted Satellite suggests to me that like our reference is like breaking down and becoming something else now.
hmm,
So like whatever people will see it as is 100 years, and whatever we saw it as like in Betty and Barney Hill times, we're like somehow in between the two now, and I don't know what it's turning into, but it literally, as you're watching it, I can like feel my priors updating or something. It's very strange.
yeah, that's very,
And there are dozens of these videos. Some of them look like vaguely humanoid, like they don't look quite like a person, but your brain does that like pareidolia thing where it's like, I'm not sure what that is. Is that a person? It's very strange stuff. Um, yeah, maybe I'll link that in the show notes. People should check it out. It's a very unpopular subreddit. Not, I shouldn't say unpopular. It's not nearly as popular as like the UFO subreddit or something, but it's way more interesting in my opinion.
yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out myself.
Check it out. Check it out for sure. Yeah, yeah. And then I got to ask the one follow up question to the UFO thing. Have you ever seen one?
You know, I think I tried to will myself into it, and I had been keeping a journal at the time that I called the weirding, and each day I was
Okay.
just
Yeah.
trying to make an entry of the weirdest thing that happened that day.
Oh,
And
that's a cool idea.
I do feel like the more you pay attention to the capital W weird, the more it pays attention to you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
or the more weird just like everyday events become. So I was
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of that project that I was walking my dogs one night, and it was a really weird walk already. We had accidentally stumbled into a ghost tour and listened to
Cool.
half of a like presentation on a haunted building that was actually next to the building that I worked in. So I was like, I might need to hear this. Um,
Yeah, right. This might be critical information. Yeah.
and then this fox ran across the road and stopped and turned, and I don't know if you've ever heard a fox like scream, but it's a very
Yeah,
unsettling sound, and it
it
like almost
is.
looked me in the eye and made that sound and then kept running.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow. Okay.
weird,
Yeah.
weird walk. And then I saw as I was circling back around home like a light in the sky that I was convinced was a UFO. I recorded it. I took it home and showed my wife or girlfriend at the time, and she was like, "No, that's a spotlight." And I watched the video. I was like, "Okay, that is probably a
Was
spotlight."
she right?
But in the midst of that walk,
Yeah.
I was like, "That's a UFO."
Right. Oh, that's cool.
So that's
That's
probably
cool.
my closest encounter.
Yeah, I'm still waiting to have mine. I haven't had one, but I would love to. I think there's almost like a thing where I almost feel like if you want it to happen too bad, but maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
Yeah, you got to be
Um,
in the sweet spot of, I don't know, not thinking about it.
yeah, right. But also like I think probably kind of open to it, or you like might not even notice it, or you wouldn't like you'll just rationalize it away or something. But yeah, I think I want it too bad.
Yeah,
So
it's
anyway, we'll see.
maybe one of these days it'll happen for us.
Yeah, yeah. I had a I there's a guy the last house I lived in, which isn't too far from where I'm at now, but is it's kind of too far for me to go back that way. There's a guy who owns a cigar store, and I was smoking cigars at the time, and I would go in, and he was part of the reason I went in was because the guy who owned it was like a sort of local fixture, and he was kind of interesting. And I didn't even know this. I'd been in there like 3 or 4 times, and I'd always like chat with him a little bit when I went in, and just like have him school me on stuff about cigars or whatever. And he apparently, just as a side note of interest, and maybe this is kind of Pynchonian actually, he had he had exclusive access to this particular Nicaraguan I guess plantation, or I don't know what they call it, right? But he was like the only guy in America that could get these particular cigars, right? He had like an exclusive deal. And he apparently was selling them by mail to Bill Clinton and James Gandolfini, among other people.
Okay.
So that's what he said, right? And I don't know if that's true or not, but they got talking to him one point, and one time he's like, "What do you do?" And I was like, "Well, I do a bunch of stuff, but I'm a writer." And he's like, "Are you into science fiction?" And it's almost like your liquor store guy. And he as soon as I started talking about writing, he just like kind of changed subjects totally and told me about this UFO that he saw in the late 90s. He was driving through a part of, and if anybody listening to this is in the Detroit area, he was driving on I-94 as it goes through the city of Detroit, but at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And he looked up and saw a triangular UFO. He said that time he'd never heard of a triangular one before, right? He'd never like he hadn't had that image in his head from any place else, and it was like the size of a football field at least, if not bigger, and it just was like slowly drifting over the freeway. And he was convinced. I mean, this was 20 years or more after it happened, and he had no second guesses about what he saw. So I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah.
He's
That
pretty sensible, rational guy.
that's
Yeah.
the they say they're attracted to liminal spaces, and I feel like 90s Detroit was a very emptied out city.
It
Could
was.
have been
Yeah, you don't have a lot of witnesses, or not a lot of
mhm.
reliable ones anyway. Yeah, yeah, that could very well be part of it. Um, there's one more of your pieces on Gnostic Pulp that I want to just touch on a little bit. And again, people listening to this, get on Substack, check out Gnostic Pulp. I guarantee if you scroll through there, you're going to find at least one article, probably a good handful of them that you're gonna find interesting. But this one's a little bit older than some of these others. Slapstick horror. Uh, I thought you had some really interesting insights, and had kind of pulled together some really interesting sort of references about the trickster figure, and it got me kind of thinking, well, about a bunch of stuff. But I guess first of all, I wanted to ask you, like, what is the trickster?
Yeah, that's a big question. It's something I've been interested in for a while. I studied anthropology in school, and probably the class that, like I said earlier, not the best student. More interested in trying to write fiction at the time and than paying attention in class or anything. But I took
Yeah, I get it.
some really cool anthropology classes. Uh, Native American belief systems was one with this professor who, I mean, he was this old white guy, Vietnam veteran, but he had been adopted into a tribe in Florida because he had been working with them his whole career. They had state recognition, which got them some benefits from Florida, but they were trying to get federal recognition, which they were struggling with because it had been several different groups of people that were sort of pushed together. And there's these stipulations. They have to be able to trace your, like, certain traditions back X amount of time, and their traditions had sort of all melted together.
Yeah.
So they're struggling to like meet that stipulation. So he was helping them like navigate the legal system and get that federal recognition. And he ended up being adopted into the tribe. And he had these.
Well, that's pretty cool.
He's had these giant scars on his back from partaking in this ceremony where you. It used to be a gar skull, and now they use a more like a medical scalpel. But you slash your back and you bleed into a fire. And they said he partook in it one time, and then they bumped him up to the like elder warrior group that doesn't have to do it
Wow.
anymore. But he went through it, and
Wow, that's intense.
so yeah, he was an intense guy, and
Oh, wow.
for whatever reason, he kind of took an interest in me and took me aside, and I should have listened to him more because he really wanted me to, get it together and go to grad school. Basically told me undergrad in anthropology was pointless, which turns out he was right in that as far as career wise goes.
Career wise.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it was him who sort of introduced me to the trickster figure, which in a lot of North American cultures would be primarily like Coyote is probably the most famous one, and Raven, and a few others. But they're pretty much present in any, traditional culture that has their intact, sacred stories and mythology, um, like Loki in North Europe or like Hermes in Greece. Basically, these amoral figures, um, very liminal figures who pass through the culture or the society. And it's not that they're like black or white, not evil or good, very amoral, show up and just sort of stir the pot. They don't follow the
Right.
rules, the expected rules, um, and in that way they kind of break down the status quo. And a lot of anthropologists kind of see it as a way of this bringing in like a eternal renewal by having this figure that breaks down the status quo and brings something in from the outside. Um,
Right.
and I think on a more like structural level, that's what Trickster is kind of operating as. Um, Also makes for some really fun stories, coyote
Sure.
stories.
Yeah.
There's really fun ones that are kind of made to be told around, the campfire. And then George Hansen is I don't know what you would call him, a parapsychologist, I guess. He looks into the trickster and basically says there's like those stories, and then there's the stories you don't tell except for in the right condition. Um, Basically showing trickster a level of respect, and it's like basically don't invite him into your life if you're not ready for it. Um,
Right.
he talked
Right.
about like
Right.
anthropologists who brought these stories without permission to like conferences, um, and ended up either coincidentally or not terrible things happening in their life
Right.
afterwards. Um, so yeah, it's this fascinating figure that's kind of found all around, all throughout humans like culture. And um, Lewis Hyde is another person I reference a lot in there. He has a book called uh, now I'm going to forget the word, the title, Trickster Makes This World. And he
Mm-hmm.
traces it even beyond humanity, basically to almost a building block of reality itself. Compares it to like gene mutations being the trickster that sort of renews species, bringing in, amoral changes that can cause havoc or can create a more well adapted mutation and cause a species to go in one direction or another. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's for me become sort of a central figure of Gnostic Pulp, and um, yeah, something that I love thinking about and exploring, and I think still very
Yeah.
active in our world.
Yeah, no, when in your essay, when you get to that point talking about sort of it happening at like the cellular level or something, that's never a thought that it would have occurred to me. I mean, I was sort of familiar with the trickster as an archetype to a certain degree, and that got really interesting to me because there is, uh, well, yeah. So something happens at that level. There is, for whatever the case, whatever you call it, like reality does need like the X factor or whatever you want to call it, the trickster or the like. I don't know if you watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Charlie Day refers to himself as the wild card, but he
Yes.
just does something completely stupid, right? But like we do kind of need like an element that just does something maybe not quite random, but unexpected and off book, and like it does kind of challenge the system. It forces the system to kind of react to it and either expel it or incorporate it. It is super important. And but there's also, I mean, that's on a sort of a philosophical level. I do think there's something like, I mean, whether it's the DMT machine elves or the just like weird coincidences that kind of sometimes can happen in your life, there does seem to be a joke happening sometimes that you can kind of catch on to or tap into. And it does make me think like, does it make sense to sometimes in your life play the role of the trickster, do you think? Like, not necessarily like deliberately screw things up, but like, is there like some value in occasionally just being like, let's just randomly shake up whatever it is that we're doing,
I,
try something completely different?
I think, I mean, certainly for an artist or writer, um, I really like the situationists and like the psychogeographers, who would do basically just, I don't know, quite trickster, but kind of artistic trickster. You take a map of London and you try and navigate Paris, and you see
Right,
if you where it takes you, trying to go to Big Ben in Paris. Um,
right.
and you kind of just, yeah, you break the normal rules, and you never know what is going to be opened up. Um, I
Yeah,
think it's, yeah, a source of renewal for cultures, for art, for
yeah,
even like on a personal level. Maybe you start to walk your dog the same path every day. It just becomes a routine. You don't even think about it, and then you take a different turn. And anytime I walk through a new neighborhood for the first time, it's like I I see like this something I'll never see again that seems to like retreat underneath. Um,
right,
I feel like that's
right.
somehow related to the trickster and what it can open up for you. But I also do think
Yeah,
it's sort of, it can be a dangerous terrain. Like, um, yeah, you're going into the unknown. So
right. Well, I also think about like uh internet troll type people who make that like their whole personality. I think like they're seizing on something of the trickster, right? But it gets like pathologized and like it turns into like a whole other thing. But they're like leveraging some of that trickster energy, at least maybe at first, and
Yeah.
then it kind of spirals off into something weird and pathological at sometimes. But um, yeah,
Yeah, I don't think it
like
can be
I,
healthy to try and occupy that role for good.
right. A little bit probably goes a long way. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, this has been really cool. I just got one other thing I want to. I try to do this with most of my guests because most of the people who listen to this show are pretty heavy readers. And so I'm trying to kind of find new books to, get people excited about. We've talked about a bunch of Thomas Pynchon and a bunch of Philip K. Dick and a little bit of Cormac McCarthy, but are there maybe two or maybe three books from your personal canon, books that are really important to you as a writer or as a thinker, as just a human being that you might recommend to the audience? Maybe something that's a little bit under the radar, depending on how you define that, I guess.
Yeah, I tried to pick a few that were unrelated to the writers we talked about.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
there's one that I don't even know how I stumbled onto it, but it has ended up being very foundational for my way of thinking lately. It's an anthology of essays by different anthropologists, um,
Okay.
but it's called Being Changed by Cross-Cultural Encounters, the Anthropology of Extraordinary Experience. And it's,
Oh, cool.
anthropologists, these scientists who are trained in a scientific background, but they go out in the field and they become so immersed in the life world of the people that they're researching, and they end up their experience of reality shifts to the people who they're living among. So there's like,
Yeah.
these scientists writing about their experiences seeing like spiritual beings that they would have never believed in otherwise. And they're trying to come to
Cool.
terms with this, like what should be impossible from their background, like actually experiencing that firsthand and,
Right.
fully experiencing it, which really opened up my mind to like how malleable reality can be, and
Yeah.
really super interesting essays.
Yeah. That sounds fascinating. I mean, I'll tell you, like one of my favorite uh like tropes in films and TV and stuff, which is similar to this, is ontological shock, where a character or characters have to like adjust or adapt to like something happening that was impossible
Hmm.
5 seconds ago. And so this sounds like this is just this in real life,
Yeah,
in a bunch of different contexts. It sounds right up my alley. I'm gonna totally check that
yeah,
out.
and it's all written in very well, depending on which one. A lot of it's very like academic writing, but
Right.
talking about seeing a
Right.
spiritual being of some sort.
Right.
So yeah,
That's
kind of
cool.
mental
Yeah.
whiplash.
Yeah, I
Um,
like that. That sounds great.
but some more novel type ones. Ursula Le Guin is not unknown, but I do feel like what I would consider her masterpiece kind of gets overlooked. Always Coming Home.
Oh, I haven't read that.
For me, one of my earliest pieces is tracing what I call the Gnostic Pulp trilogy, which I start with Moby Dick, then Gravity's Rainbow, and then Always Coming Home as sort of the finale of that trilogy.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
Um,
Okay.
and it's just way more experimental and a much,
Huh.
I don't know. She really like, yeah, really went for a home run on that one, and
Okay.
I
Okay.
don't know what else to
I'm checking
compare
that
it
out for
to
sure.
other than those two books.
Yeah. I uh, she's one of those writers who I haven't read that much, but what I have read, I've loved. So hearing this, just this is going pretty near the top of the stack.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
incredible. And then the third
Yeah.
one, just because it's been my favorite sort of contemporary novel, I think it came out 2020 actually, which is weird because it is a novel about the bubonic plague, and it happened to come out in 2020. It's called
Okay.
Nobber.
Yeah.
by Oisin Fagan, Irish writer. He's got 2 novels now. This was his first.
Say the name of the title again.
Nobber, Nobber.
Oh, okay. Huh.
It's just
Cool.
hilarious in the way that like Pynchon can be, but set in like medieval Ireland. Just
Very cool.
basically a bunch of con men of different types coming together in this town of Nobber, each trying to get one over on each other as the Black Death has basically cleared out the land. Very dark comedy, beautiful prose. I think I've lent out my copy 3 or 4 times. One of my friends has it right now, so I've been pushing that book on everyone.
Cool. No, that sounds great. I haven't heard of that. That I'm gonna look into that one too. Yeah, cool. No, those are 3 great ones. That's expanding our horizons here for sure. Uh, well, Jacob, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for your time. Again, people listening, you can find Jacob on Substack, Gnostic Pulp at Substack. The link to that will be in the show notes. I know you've got a lot of you've got fiction published here and there. Is all of that findable in one spot, or if people want to go down the Jacob Austin fiction side of things, is there an easy way to get through to that?
Yeah, I'm on Linktree, Linktree/Jacob Austin.
Okay.
Which is also linked on the Gnostic Pulp, like the About page on Substack.
Okay. Cool.
But yeah.
All right. Well, people, yeah, we'll go there. Yeah, thanks so much. It was great talking to you. It's great getting to know you a little bit.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thanks for having me.
Of course.